Hi, my name is Shawn Boyd. I'm the curator of archives at History Colorado, and this is Insights in 5 Census Research with a Colorado Twist. The census is authorized by the United States Constitution, and I've put the quote down there of where it is in the Constitution. It's how congressional districts are allotted to states. And it's an important source for tracking people and places in the United States and even for finding general demographic trends. It's been conducted every 10 years since 1790 and released every 72 years because of privacy. So 1940 is the most recent set of data. The 1890 census was destroyed in a fire at the National Archives. So for Colorado in particular, that's a pretty major loss. It lists every household, and after 1850, it lists every person in the household. The data varies from year to year, but generally it lists name, age, marital status, race, relationship, what country they're from or state, and also where their parents were from, their occupation, and other personal information like real estate or property value, level of education, and in 1930, whether the family owned a radio. There are several websites you can visit to find the census. Some of them cost money and some of them are free. On the paid side, you have Ancestry.com and Fold3.com, which is a subset of Ancestry, as well as MyHeritage. Ancestry and MyHeritage index the census separately, so if you have a subscription to one, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the same data as the other because of how they transcribed it. And then there are a couple of free sites, particularly the 1940 census is available at the National Archives. It's browsable, not searchable. So you'd have to know the town and hopefully the page that your person is on. And then FamilySearch.org also has some census data on there, and those are both free. Because the census was indexed separately on different websites, you may need to check multiple sites if you can't find the person or people you're looking for. You should also try all spelling variations possible or use wildcard searches that are usually available via the website's help screens. And then search the first name if it's unique enough and you don't know a location. Be flexible about first names. Maggie, Margaret, M period, and Meg may all be the same person. You should also, if you can't find them, browse a specific location. And if you know a neighbor, you could try them. People didn't move quite as much in the 1800s, although in Colorado they did tend to move around a bit. Remember that sometimes census information was reported by a person who didn't know all the requested facts to a person with poor handwriting who couldn't spell. If you're searching the census records prior to 1850, only the head of household is listed with numbers across the line for the number of people in each age and gender category on almost like a spreadsheet, as well as the number of slaves in each category if it's applicable. After 1850, every person in the household is listed, but the relationships aren't listed until 1880. So John and Mary could be husband and wife, or they could be brother and sister, or they could be father and daughter. You can't tell until 1880. Women are listed under whatever name they were using at the time, which is usually their married name, but if sometimes women used their maiden name as their middle initial, so be aware of that as well. Women are sometimes easier to find through their husbands, fathers, brothers, and sons because their names don't change, and particularly when they got older, women tended to live with their adult children. Ancestry has a nifty Find Related Records feature to help find the same person in other records. It's somewhat reliable. It's on the right-hand side of the screen, but always look at it critically before accepting that information because sometimes it's not right. This is a page of the 1900 census from Parker, Colorado. Now, just looking at it holistically, you can see at the top it lists what county it's in, the township, the date that it was taken. This one was done on the 6th of July, 1900, so they were a little behind. They were supposed to get this all done in June of 1900. And then some of the census tracking information. If we go to the left-hand side, the columns the first column is the street. So if you're in a city or a larger organized town, then they may list the street. I've only ever seen it in Denver, although Colorado Springs and Pueblo may also have those street names. Then it would be the house number, then the number of the household, followed by the number of the family, because there could be multiple families living in one household. Then you have the names, and you'll notice that the names are grouped by last name. So, for example, on line 53, Julie Warder doesn't have her name listed, her last name listed, because it's implied that everybody under that is part of that family. It will be listed in the indexing. The next column is the relationship between that person and the head of household. Then we have race and gender and month and year of birth. I found this to be somewhat reliable, but not entirely. Their age at their last birthday, whether they're married or single or widowed or divorced, and then the number of years they've been married, how many children they've had, and then how many are still living. And that's only on the wife's line. Then we have the state that they were born in, the state that their father was born in, the state that their mother was born in. Could also be country. You'll notice down on line 65, that person is from Canada and speaks English. That's designating from French Canadian. So then it has the year that they emigrated to the United States, if they're not citizens, and then the number of years they've been in the United States, and then what their status is, immigration status is. Then we have occupation, the number of weeks unemployed, education if they were in school. So line 55, Henry was in school for 9 months. Whether they can read, whether they can write, whether they can speak English, whether they own or rent their house, and whether it's mortgaged or free and clear. So F is free, M is mortgage. Whether it's a farm or a house. So F is farm, H is house. And then if it's on a farm schedule, it's got a number. So this tells us a lot of things. If we look at that first family, the Warder family, we can tell that Julie and Edward were married 24 years ago. They've had 4 children, of whom 2 are still alive. There are 2 children living with them, Kay, Edna, and Henry H. Those children are 22 and 17 years old. And Edna was born in Tennessee in 1878, which probably means that, and Henry was born in Tennessee in 1882. So that means they didn't come to Colorado until at least after 1882. And then they're living on a farm, and Henry's in school. So you can start to figure out a lot about a family based on some of what's recorded in the census. So these are more tips just focused on Colorado. The first census that would have people living in Colorado would be the 1850 census, because the southern part of Colorado came into the United States after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. And the town of San Luis wasn't yet established, but there were people living on the census for Taos, New Mexico, the Northern District, that may include people who later were listed as living in Colorado. They may not have even moved, or they may be people who migrated up to Colorado later. 1860, Colorado was part of the United States, but parts of Colorado are listed on the 1860 census in Kansas, New Mexico, Utah, and Nebraska. There are individuals listed, but there's no relationship info. So you have to kind of know what part of the state to look in. For the Denver metro area and the Front Range, it's mostly Kansas. Points north of Fort Collins and east, like where Sterling and Julesburg are, would be in Nebraska. And then the western half of the state would be Utah, and the southern part is in New Mexico, South Pueblo. In 1870, Colorado is listed as the Colorado Territory in most indexes, and there's still no relationship info, but it is pretty much one unit. And then between 1880 and 1840, you just have to be aware of county boundary changes and don't get too geographically tied to a town. Many people who lived in other parts of the state also had a house in Denver. And of course, that 1890 census is missing. So the 1885 census for just Colorado is pretty good, and it's also used, it's quite useful for finding that missing 1890 data. The online version on Ancestry is pretty blurry, and often they only use initials, but it can fill in some of those gaps. If you want to get access to these records, many public libraries and the National Archives in Broomfield have Ancestry Library Edition, which includes the U.S. and international records. Those are free, but they generally have to be researched on site. Family History Centers, which are part of the LDS Church, also have access to these ancestry records, and they are experts on FamilySearch.org. History Colorado has several census indexes. In 1860, we have a card file name index for Colorado in Kansas and Nebraska for that year. We have an index for Arapahoe County in manuscript number 639. We also have what purports to be a complete printed index for Colorado. For 1870 and 1880, we have 2 printed indexes for each of those that were done by separate groups. And for 1885, we just have Arapahoe County and index, but that would include Denver. And in 1900, we have the microfilm for Arapahoe, Archuleta, Baca, and Bent counties. And we have the index to Boulder and Garfield counties. And for 1910, we have an index to Boulder County.